front steps of Escondido tutorial service, Diala flipped through pages of the Iliad, getting a head start on next week's assigned reading as she waited for choir practice to begin. As the cool breeze danced through her long auburn hair and the rays of sunshine kissed her sweet face, the young girl read of the face that launched 1,000 ships. Just then, a cat walked past Diala, pausing to look at her with its Egyptian eyes before running away. Worried that the small creature might face the talons of a nearby hawk, Diala set down her book and chased the cat down the path that led to the lower orchards. Halting at the bosky lawn, the cat sat and stared into the shadows behind the trees, as if it knew of something hiding within. Cautiously, Diala began to walk through the congregation of trees, peering at the shadow, now taking a peculiar shape. Just as she was about an arm's length away, an enormous force bolted up, throwing Diala to the ground in shock. Recovering from the fall, Diala looked up into the sky, squinting at the sun's bright aura. The beams of light that cast on her began to flicker, like an eclipse that had forgotten whether to move clockwise or counterclockwise. Down before the apprehensive woman flew a man, yet this being was not human. From out of his back sprouted two enormous wings, the length of his body span, which dragged by his ankles as he walked before her. Diala had never seen anything so magnificent in her entire life. Out of breath, she cried, You are a seraph! Helping her up, the radiant creature replied, My name is Branimir. Though I remain mostly unseen, I am always near, assuring your protection. Diala, you have been selected to go back in time and meet four of the most remarkable women of literature. Through your journey, you will witness and learn from the virtues of a godly woman, as well as her vices. That is why Virgil, pointing to the cat, has brought you to me. Will you join me on this grand adventure? This was a lot to take in for Diala, first meeting her guardian angel and now talk of an expedition. Despite this, she could not ignore her curiosity and knew that there was only one question to be asked. Who is it that you serve? Standing tall with pride, Branimir replied, Why, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega, that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Satisfied by his answer, Diala grabbed a hold of the seraph's outstretched hand. Immediately, the green terraces in sight of the schoolhouse began to vanish as they flew into the obscurity of a winding portal that had appeared before them. Looking around, Diala found herself in a mossy cave hiding behind a waterfall. Going about their ways were dozens of men, women, and seraphim. Welcome to Chasiel, a haven for those coming from and going out into the worlds of the past and present. Our group has two components, the Guardians and the Warriors. The branch of Guardians is made up of seraphs who either protect or recruit. Those who demonstrate true dedication to the Lord serve in combat, redeeming captives from the clutches of evil and enforcing morality. You, dear one, have been chosen to join a team of women who as well possess virtues of a loyalist. Will you accept the opportunity to learn from the most remarkable woman of tales past? Amazed by this revelation, Diala replied, I am honored to accept. Good, then I shall take you to your faithful comrades, where you will receive your first assignment. Leading the wide-eyed woman down a long corridor with a torch in hand, its light reflecting off the wet, glossy rock walls, Branimir soon entered a candlelit room where four women sat around a stone table. Ah, gentlewoman, I would like to introduce you to the newest addition of your battalion, Diala. The first to approach her was a woman with dark hair and olive-toned skin. She spoke, Welcome to Chasiel, Diala. I am your captain, Beatrice. Allow me to introduce you to our company, Rosalind, Penelope, and Antigone. Branimir began to describe their assignment. Ladies, your mission will take place in a country known as Troy. Interrupting the seraph with excitement, Diala declared, I know of this place. I've been reading about this war that started there because a Trojan prince stole this beautiful woman from the Greek king who fought for almost 10 years to retrieve her. It was not until one of his friends invented the brilliant idea of the Trojan horse, the hollow statue given to the Trojan king as a peace sacrifice, but it actually disguised the Achaean men hiding inside of it so that they could get past the Trojan wall and defeat the city. Branimir replied, As pleased as I am to see that our newest member is well read, I must correct you. The target of this mission is to fix what has been impeded, for in fact, the Trojan horse has failed. Gasping at the shocking news, one of the women spoke, What is the cause of this scandalous outcome? It was the corruption of their spokesman. Sinon, the Achaean soldier who brought the horse to the Trojans, revealed to King Priam of the Achaean secret in exchange for his own protection and promotion in rank. When did such arrangements take place? Inquired Beatrice. Hector, fated to die at the hands of Achilles, missed his time of downfall when he received news of the captured Cain, whom they convinced to commit betrayal in exchange for his survival. Thus Hector still lives, Achilles once more full of rage as he awaits the opportunity to kill his foe, and Paris has not yet shot that Cain hero. Furthermore, because of Sinon's treachery, his comrades whom hid within the horse were captured and locked in the highest tower of the Trojan palace. It is your mission to fix what has been wronged, to defeat the Trojans and rescue Helen. Speaking with a cynical tone, the girl with a scrawny physique and expression of earnestness said, "So, you are expecting merely 5 women to ransack an entire city and complete a rescue mission of the most desired individual in ancient history?" Rosalind replied, "Antigone, in order to complete this mission, we must put aside any pessimistic comments and use our wisdom to choreograph a plan. For starters, we are all going to need disguises, so as not to reveal that we are from the future." "Rosalind, you would be the one to suggest disguises," snarked Antigone. "As I was saying, in order to pass the Trojan wall, we shall dress ourselves as Trojan ladies' maids. Thus no one will question our presence." "What about my husband and his men?" inquired Penelope. Rosalind replied, "Penelope, I understand that you might hope to see Odysseus from the past, the man you knew before you died and were resurrected for Chasiel. Yet, I think it is for your own good that you focus on the mission of rescuing Helen. Dial will join you, being that there will be less of a risk for battle in Helen's bedroom, except perhaps the possibility of running into Paris. Although that fool can barely use a bow and arrow, a woman's weapon, we will equip you with swords, and the coward will be sure to leave you alone." Antigone spoke up. "Yet what about the men? Those Achaean heroes who remain distressed by their bondage? Are we to leave them in that tower to never live to see the day that Troy is defeated? Ladies, it is our responsibility to defend the helpless. We must dress ourselves with strength and reach out our hands to the needy captives." "Yet doing so could risk our own safety and jeopardize the mission," cried Rosalind. Antigone professed, "Even if I die in the act, that death will be a glory." "Antigone is right," declared Beatrice. "We must rescue the men. Antigone, Rosalind, and myself will free them from their captivity, allowing them to assist us in the annihilation of Troy. Doing so will serve as the perfect distraction for Penelope and Diala to help Helen escape." Their plan being formulated, the 5 women changed into their disguises and chose their means of defense from the weaponry wall. Branimir blessed their journey, saying, "The time has come to put on the whole armor of the Lord, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of evil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the cosmic powers over this present darkness." 4 seraphs entered the room, joining Branimir in delivering the female warriors through a portal, whereafter they found themselves a mile's distance from the great wall of Troy. The gate opened as the Trojan soldiers questioned a line of enslaved Achaean women of their assigned commissions and provided directions. The 5 disguised women ran to the back of the line, keeping their heads down, assuming the role of mourning vassals. Beatrice approached the officer of the enemy, who bellowed, "Where have you been assigned, lovely bondwoman?" "The 5 of us are to serve in the Lady Helen's chambers, sir," replied Beatrice, still refraining from making eye contact. Another soldier approached them and escorted the woman up the palace steps, past the enormous columns. Pointing down the marble hallway, the soldier blustered, "This path will eventually break off into 2 directions. Be sure to enter the door on your right, which leads to Helen's chambers. To the left is a stairway that leads to the tower prison. Not that such information should concern you." The woman began walking down the hall, and the soldier left them, returning to his post. Beatrice turned to her foursome and said, "All right, Rosalind, Antigone, and myself will go to the tower where we will rescue the men. Penelope and Diala, you wait here until you see one of us leave. That will be your signal to enter Helen's chambers. Once our mission is complete, Branimir and the seraphs shall open the portal and retrieve each of us individually." Racing up the endless steps, the 3 women found themselves out of breath once they reached the top of the stairwell. Sitting behind a prison barrier was Odysseus and his comrades. Their leader arose and smiled at the visitors. "Tell me, has King Priam finally agreed to provide his prisoners with bread and water? Or has he even gone as far as to entertain us with your magnificent beauty? I do say, I like you ladies much better than the scruffy soldiers who usually come and taunt us." Beatrice replied, "Cut the flattery, Odysseus. We are not here to cheer up your prison cell. Although we are merely Trojan girls, we support your endeavors and wish to free you from your bondage. In exchange, you may kill our masters and set us free." Laughing, Odysseus cried, "Ladies, please do not insult me. not need your assistance. I am Odysseus, the brilliant king of Ithaca. Just then, something caught Antigone's attention. To the right of the prison was a doorway, which led outside, where there, about a yard away, stood the Trojan prince, atop the palace wall, watching the Achaean fleets. Removing her scars to reveal a full gear of armor, Antigone shouted, "Hector, come and fight, an Achaean warrior, if you dare challenge my dexterity." Hector released his rapier and shouted, "How did you get here, you malignant barbarian? Guards, there are trespassers in the prison tower." Beatrice cried, "Were we not trying to achieve this mission clandestinely?" Antigone shoved Beatrice out of her way. "Hector is our adversary. He is the son of King Priam and one of the most influential conductors of this wretched war." Beatrice replied, "Yes, he is very powerful and has many who support him, whereas we are merely a few women. Our best tactic is persuasion, to show him that this war is not a means of showcasing each country's fortitude, but rather to reunite a woman with her husband. Antigone, you may clothe yourself with strength and dignity. You may say you fight for justice, yet you forget the dogma of Chasiel, to carry out our mission with love rather than enmity. Love prompted this mission, that love which makes me speak. I implore you to rid yourself of anger, rage, malice, and slander, and clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Forgive these Trojan men as the Lord has forgiven you, and show them the truth of righteousness." Beatrice, our mission was to carry out what these Achaean idiots could not do on their own. Our mission was to save Helen and defeat Troy. We lack the time to consider strategic rhetoric, so we must act on our instincts and fight. Eager for retribution, Antigone darted through the door, charging at Hector with her blade above her head. Beatrice sighed at Antigone's foolishness and turned around to find Rosalind, having already opened the prison locks. However, the men, their arms crossed and their faces stern, seemed unwilling to leave the dungeon. Rosalind explained, "They refused to leave their captivity because King Priam threatened to execute Helen should they attempt to escape." Beatrice responded, "Thanks to Antigone, our time is limited before the Trojan troops are upon us. I shall find the king and warn him that if he does not end the war, the destruction of his city will be inevitable. Meanwhile, you find a way to get these men out of their cell to help you fight off any enemies." Rushing down the staircase, Beatrice reached the level where Penelope and Diala awaited their signal. Before they could enter Helen's chambers, the doors to the hallway burst open as a man walked in, combing his luscious golden locks and finishing his grooming with a dashing hair flip. Spotting Beatrice, the young man smiled. "Fairest lady, to whom do I owe the pleasure of observing your immaculate beauty?" Rolling her eyes at his erratic heart, Beatrice replied, "Do you not have a love of your own, one whom you stole from another and aroused an entire war for?" "These are mere complications," he said as he kneeled and grabbed her hand. "I am Prince Paris, the most handsome man in the world, and I command you to tell me your name." Concerned that he might call someone of greater intelligence, who might realize that she was not actually a Trojan servant, she spoke, "My name is Beatrice, but I must leave, for I need to speak with the king about urgent matters." "The king is engrossed with other responsibilities, but you may speak to me. The same followers of the king take orders from me as well, and besides, it would bring me much joy to hear the sweet melody from your divine lips." Beatrice snapped her hand away before her newfound suitor attempted to kiss it, and hesitantly began to share her reasoning. "The issue I was to take to the king concerns the well-being of Troy. For I should warn you that if you do not end the attacks on the Achaeans, destruction will soon follow you. Consequently, many men, women, children, as well as the glory of your city will face termination. Now is the last opportunity to establish peace." Interrupting her discourse, Paris declared, "As you wish, my lady. I shall order all our troops to return to our city." Running to the nearby window, the prince blew his horn, and immediately the troops outside the wall entered the palace. Surprised by his lack of lengthy consideration, Beatrice inquired, "Do you really mean that? I did not even discuss my third and fourth arguments." "Indeed, you are persuasive and beautiful and enchanting. I would call troops for your approval, move mountains to impress you, journey dangerous seas to greet you, and give you all the treasures of Troy in hopes of one kiss in return." Beatrice declared, "I hate to disappoint you, but I cannot accept your offer of love." Wiping away a tear, Paris cried, "I think this may be the first time I've ever been rejected, having always been so saintly and cruel." I confess, I used to take advantage of my beauty to win the affection of other men, especially one in particular. Though I never made him any promises of affection, I never put an end to it either, causing his infectious heart to lead to madness. However, I have now devoted my life to the Lord, accepting his forgiveness in hopes of carrying out his will. "I believe I have acquired this heart disease you speak of," lamented Paris. "Yet your goodness, dear Beatrice, has converted me, and I shall forever follow your lead and love the God whom you love." Aware of Diala and Penelope's need to enter Helen's chambers, Beatrice left the hallway, Paris following her with doting eyes. Diala turned to Penelope, whispering, "Now is our chance," and entered Helen's chambers. Penelope, following behind, stopped as she heard something behind her. There was Rosalind, Odysseus, and his men. Odysseus spoke. "Now remember our promise. I agreed to leave the prison cell, help rescue Helen, and attack the soldiers downstairs in exchange for a kiss." Rosalind, embracing the role of her disguise in order to ensure her safety, kissed the flirtatious man and led the group towards the palace steps, where Paris had ordered his men to await within the enclosed walls. Although wounded by what she had witnessed, Penelope knew there was little time and entered the room, expecting to find a depressed wife. Yet instead, there waited an anxious mistress. "Paris, is that you, my love?" questioned the elegant lady. Diala spoke. No, we are two servants sent by Menelaus to rescue you." "Rescue? I have never enjoyed myself as much as these past weeks being worshipped by Paris. Do you know how nice it is to not have to kiss someone who has become fat and ugly over time? Leaving Menelaus was the best decision of my life." Diala spoke. "Your husband is the one who has risked his life and the lives of his friends and people in hopes of proving his love to you, whereas your suitor, I believe, was the one flirting with the maid outside your door. Is that really the relationship you would like to pursue?" Helen sobbed. "You speak of me as some seducer, yet Menelaus as well committed adultery with his multitudes of concubines. Do you know how it feels to have the loyalty to your love be unmatched?" Remembering the despairing sight she saw before, yet uncomfortable to have her marital problems be publicly displayed, Penelope denied such experience. "Love is a complicated thing, my dear, and that over time you come to see each other's faults. Times of tension will test your relationship, and perhaps the two of you will lose attraction to one another. Yet there is a unique beauty in a long-lasting marriage when you choose to appreciate the virtues over vices, endure through your fights because you are committed until death, and care for your husband so that when he is gray of age, he will trust in you and have no lack of gain because he knows that your love is faithful. Such love may pass the test of time, that even after years of separation, one may reunite with her love and confidently say, 'You make my stiff heart know that I am yours.' Helen, I truly believe that you and Menelaus still have a chance to recreate the blessed marriage you desire." Wiping her tears, the convinced woman asked, "If I did agree to make a second attempt at a more spiritually fulfilling marriage, how would I even escape this room?" "Outside your door are a group of Achaean men who are prepared to escort us to your husband, fighting off any Trojan soldiers who contradict. But we must leave now." Suddenly, an outrage of screaming bursted from outside, and the three women peeked out the window to see Achilles dragging the corpse of Hector, whose body had been punctured with Antigone's spear. Furthermore, it appeared that the Achaeans had launched burning logs over the wall, setting fire to the trapped city. "The attack has begun," exclaimed Penelope, "which means that the other women have completed their missions. Diala, you must leave immediately in order to catch Brandimir's portal. I will take care of returning Helen." Diala opened the door to the hallway to find the swirling portal, Brandimir floating within it. Diala grabbed a hold of his extended hand, and the two of them left the scene. While her last two experiences of time traveling had been mind-boggling, this time Diala was more aware of her surroundings, hearing what sounded like the melodies of angels singing "Si Hu Chervus." "Brandimir," the woman asked, "what do those unfamiliar words mean?" "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. Diala, you have met some of the most godly women of tales past. You have seen how they seek to possess faith, wisdom, strength, and fidelity. Yet they have also failed reaching this expectation. As you witness, they were vulnerable to vanity, manipulation, hatred, and fraud. Even the best role models Chasiel can produce have fallen short of the glory of God. Yet even in their moments of weakness, they may bring honor to him by demonstrating the bounds of his grace and their need of it. And through him, the 5 of you were able to achieve your mission. For that, I pray that this journey encourage you to always sing Sicut Cervus and to live a life that brings splendor to the Lord Almighty. At the sound of the sopranos hitting their high D of the 11th measure, Diella awoke, finding that she had fallen asleep under the front steps, her finger holding her spot at the end of chapter 22, and she was now late for choir practice. Amazed by her detailed dream, Diella reminisced on Brandimir's advice and ran into the schoolhouse, just in time to finish the last few measures of Sicut Cervus.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Appreciate your very dramatic presentation. I would like to begin by asking you about your connection to the particular piece, Sicut Cervus, and the storyline that you created in your paper. Is there a particular connection between the content of Sicut Cervus and how your storyline is played out?
Yeah, one of the lessons, well, okay, I'll start with this. When I first started writing my paper, I began by just wanting to address the virtues of each of these women from our GBT books. However, as I was reading it, I found myself comparing my own virtues and vices to their virtues. And then as I continued my studies, I began to realize that they themselves had their own vices, and that even though these authors and I myself have upheld them as role models, for ourselves, they still have their vices and they still aren't perfect. And so I was trying to decide, can these women still stand as an example of a Proverbs 31 woman? Can they still uphold to the standards held that God's word gives us? And I realized that even though they have their vices and even though we have our vices, through our virtues, we can still bring glory to his name, and for that, we should praise him for that. And so that's why I decided to bring in Sicut Cervus, which is, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. So like a deer that pants for water, we desire his mercy and his grace, and we need God in order to bring out good in our virtues.
Okay, thank you very much. And I understand your imagery of Chasiel as something of a place of spiritual exercise and proving for these various saints. Can you explain what basically the concept of Chasiel is as it plays out in your story?
Yeah, I guess you could say it's like a home base for missionaries or evangelists as well as the angels. Just a haven for those wishing to go out and carry out the will of the Lord.
All right, and so are they a sort of, I guess, visions of assistance to angels, that sort of thing, doing God's bidding?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right, also, major theme in the story is females going into battle. And in your image of godly females, as it comes from the scriptures, is there any other female in the scripture that you can point to that does actually take up the sword?
From the scripture? That's actually something I haven't considered. That'd be a good point to go back and read that. Okay.
Well, I have to say, I just remember good old Santa Claus's statement in the, or Father Christmas's statement in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that when women enter battle, it becomes ugly. And why in God's forces would it be of such a desperate state that the women have had to go into battle?
I think in this case, one of the missions that they were trying to achieve was rescuing Helen. And so, though they did not know at the time that she was actually a mistress that had been seduced and did not want to leave, the woman would have had more of an impact on her and being able to relate with her and convince her to go back to her husband than a man would have in that means of persuasion.
Okay, thank you. All right, also you have this line from Odysseus. He says, I am Odysseus, the brilliant king of Ithaca. Now, Odysseus seems to always, throughout the Odyssey, be very good at restraining his passions, and here he seems to give in to boasting very quickly. Did you mean for that contradiction of character to be illuminating of his true nature, or is that showing something that you're trying to show him being inconsistent with his usual nature?
No, I would say that he was pretty prideful throughout the Odyssey. You think back to the story of the Cyclops, and as he's leaving, and he could have probably returned home had he had not revealed his identity, yet he chose to reveal his identity out of his pride. And I think by the end of the story, he has learned the lesson of humility. However, I wanted to keep up that consistency that he probably would have kept out of that sort of character in the Iliad.
All right. Also, the position that you have, I forget who's, I guess Beatrice. Beatrice expresses this position, and I forget who, I think she's talking to Antigone. She says, I implore you to rid yourself of anger, rage, malice, and slander, and clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. The context of that statement is a military mission in which they are going to kill people. And is that attitude consistent with that, or are you trying to illuminate something about the true nature of war with that being the expressed attitude?
Could you rephrase your question?
Certainly. Sorry about that. Unnecessary complexity to it. The statement that Beatrice makes about the necessity of conducting themselves with compassion and kindness, is that statement meant to be a contradiction to what they're doing, which is going in to have a military mission and kill people, or is that somehow still consistent with the understanding of this mission that they're on?
I think it can be related to both military tactics for women, I guess, as well as the character of a Proverbs 31 woman. I have in the footnote there one of the quotes before that I took was from Dante's Inferno, and Beatrice is quoted to be describing love to be like a person that causes Beatrice to act in specific ways, and by describing love as an agent that causes her to act in such ways, she reinforces the idea that she wants to be like God, who created the universe out of love. And so you see Beatrice attempting, before fighting the Trojans, that she's trying to warn them that they should take down their soldiers and attempt to establish peace. And I think that could be applied not only as we as individuals trying to establish love with others, but also in military tactics, trying to establish love and means of peace before acting on our passions, as Antigone did.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. All right, others have questions for Ms. Herr?
So it seems like throughout this whole story, which is wonderful by the way, you seem to be making a pretty strong connection between the Proverbs 31 woman and spiritual warfare. Is that something that you're trying to develop, and if so, I would love to hear more about it.
Could you clarify what you mean by spiritual warfare?
Okay, so this Chasiel, this place where the seraphim and the saints are gathered so that they can go out and, you know, fight evil and try to save souls. I think Branimir tells Diana that our struggles are not against flesh and blood, so that you know, the whole concept of the armor of God, you know, fighting against those forces of evil, and then you're also giving us kind of this picture of the Proverbs 31 woman's character. And so I was just kind of wondering, like, how are those two concepts related? Because you seem to relate them pretty strongly.
Yeah, I think part of the spiritual warfare would be bringing out the vices in each of the women. Although I didn't touch into the aspect of the gods and such that were described in the Iliad, I guess that could be related in such a sense in that they brought out some of the vices of the characters in the Iliad, and so instead of deliberately calling them the gods, you know, I related it to our own theology, and just how each of the women were tempted to give in to their vices and temptations. Does that answer your question?
Other questions?
Yeah, I really like your paper.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the whole paper there seems to be this theme of male chauvinism, from Paris to Odysseus and Hector, and even the guard that was sending them to Helen Chambers, he said something like, "Oh, this other door leads to the prison, but that doesn't even matter. You know, that shouldn't concern you." So, with this paper, did you purposefully make it have a more? It seems like it had a bit of a feministic leniency to it. Is that on purpose, or does it just come out like that?
I was just trying to take up the character of probably how men treated women back in that day, but not trying to make any inclinations that, you know, women are superior to men or men are superior to women nowadays or anything, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I loved your paper. It was amazing. I was very intrigued the entire time. Mine is more kind of just a fun question, but like, what made you choose these specific women that you use?
I think I was just thinking of the characters that I loved the most during our GBT readings, and then just trying to balance that with the word count. I mean, there's like several other women that I would have considered, but my first time I was like twice over the word count, so I had to cut out a couple characters. But just like pointing out the woman that I wanted to be like as far as in reference to their virtues. So having the strength of Antigone, having the loyalty of Penelope, having the wisdom of Rosalind, you know. Yeah.
In the last page, Beatrice confesses that she used to take advantage of her beauty to win the affection of other men, and then she goes on to talk about one that she had not made any promises of affection to, but sort of kind of let it on. Is that Dot you're talking about?
Yes, yeah. I took some artistic license.
Great job, by the way. Thank you. This is kind of going on with Olivia's question, but it seems like I really like how you, for a lot of the women here, you give them points where they kind of reflect on their own lives and things that they've learned. And it seems like because of the things they've learned, they're almost, their characters are a little different from when we read them because they were still going through those experiences and they learned from them later on. In a time in their life when we're not reading about them. So I was wondering, could you just talk a little bit more about that? How it seems like their characters are almost a little different than when we read them and what they're learning when we read them.
Yeah, part of that was trying to establish like the plot and how it would flow, and that, you know, trying to explain that these women were resurrected for Chasiel, that they, you know, because some of these women were Greek pagans, and now I'm using them as examples for Christian women. So some of that was artistic license. You know, I had to develop a new story for them in which they had devoted their lives to the Lord, so that there wouldn't be any confusion with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, going off of Emma's question, that was a lovely paper, by the way. I really enjoyed it. But like you were talking about, what is it that made you take a lot of, most of these were intrinsically the way that they were written, pagan women, and how did you relate their pagan theology in the way that their characters were played out in the books in which all of their stories took place to a Proverbs 31 woman? Was it something that you look back on and said, I see these character attributes, or was it something different than that? I was curious to...
Yeah, I'd say it was their character attributes. I mean, if you think, kind of jumping out from the bigger picture, if you think about all our GBT readings, we didn't read all Christian books. We read some pagan books, we read, like, you know, all these different books that came from different cultures and beliefs, and we were able to read them and pick out what we could take from that and what we could apply to our own lives, and so that's kind of what I did with these characters.
Guessing you would not want to be like Helen?
No.
You had expressed concern earlier about the poor way in which women were treated in ancient times, and I have to say I'm not quite sure if that was always the case. However, in this paper, to present a paper wherein men are constantly picking up on women in a fashion that seems somewhat disrespectful, or having their lifelong ambition and kill taken over by a woman, is this paper itself a sort of mistreatment of men?
That was not the intent. I was just trying to take up the characters, the humorous qualities that I was able to find in my perception of reading the Odyssey and the Iliad, but I wasn't trying to make any inclination of the nature of the relationship between men and women.
Mm-hmm. Also, in the characters that you chose as examples, all 5 of the positive examples are women, and those that you chose to learn from and seeing their various virtues. Is there any reason why there was no men that were in that group that you chose to put forward as the examples?
Yes, because I was basing the standards for a godly woman based on Proverbs 31, which describes a woman of God, so it kind of wouldn't have flowed well if I used a man to describe the qualities of a woman of God.
Mm-hmm. And in giving an image of the godly woman, you use primarily battlefield imagery. Mm-hmm. And is there any basis for that in Proverbs 31?
Let me see, I brought up my Proverbs 31. I guess you could say, it describes the strength of a godly woman, and though it doesn't describe a woman armed, ready for war, it was just more imagery, I guess you could say, and that the woman still has to undergo different difficulties, and it describes how she's able to persevere through those and bring honor to her husband and her family. So, no, it does not directly describe a woman in war, but I think it could be compared.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly the context of battle is a very good context to display human character. Mm-hmm. And in battle is that place wherein you are attempting to take other people's lives before they take that of yours. And there's certainly it's very classic that the virtue of courage has to be very much displayed in that courage and fearlessness in the face of a noble death, as Aristotle says. Mm-hmm. Now, as you are looking more generally at human character, is the context of battle actually a good context in which to display more general human virtues, as you've chosen to do here? Or is the context of battle actually not a very good context to learn more general human virtues? I mean, as Proverbs 31 is talking about many virtues, many of them not having anything to do with the battlefield context. Yeah. Is the battlefield, why did you choose the battlefield context, and how does that context help you in your paper display the particular virtues that you wanted to demonstrate through your characters?
Well, I think in a battlefield, because the consequences are either life or death of many of one's actions, I felt it appropriate because it caused each of the characters to show their true qualities, because they knew that the consequences of their actions would be life or death. And it required them to show the courage to live or not. Well, it encouraged the woman to have the courage to possess their virtues and continue that through the battlefield, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, historically, the battlefield has primarily been a male occupation, and it has always been seen as a place where character is really shown. I mean, you really see who are the men and who are the boys on the field of battle.
Yeah.
And, do you think that women need to experience battle to have the opportunity to display really who's the women and who are the girls?
That's not really a point I considered before. I don't think so. I think that everyone goes through their own trials in life that will test them. God will test each of us appropriately with what we can handle or what we cannot. Not saying that maybe a battlefield isn't as strenuous or as hard of a trial as other experiences in one's life and the relationships one develops in their own community. So no, I don't think every woman needs to go into war in order to truly be trialed.
Mm-hmm. Also, in Christianity, we are predominantly exhorted, as we look at who our examples are to be godlike, to be Christ-like, I have not heard people often exhorted to be spirit-like, but I suppose that would be a proper exhortation. And the fact that God and Christ are both described as male in the scriptures, do you think this is in any way a particular difficulty for females who would attempt to have these role models?
Saying, is it difficult to have Christ as a role model because he's male? Is that what you're asking?
Well, and God the Father, Christ the Son and God the Father are both described as male. And previously you had said, in looking at your role models, you wanted to look at Proverbs 31 women, and so you wanted to look at women as role models. And so my question is there any particular difficulty in having Christianity, a faith wherein so much of the time we are exhorted to be Christ-like and God-like? Is there a difficulty for that in being particularly female and trying to understand what those exhortations are about and understanding what you are to try to be in response to those exhortations?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a little more, I guess, for lack of better words, obvious for male individuals to understand their connection and their God-like image to Christ and God the Father, and that you see the Father sacrificing his Son and for the good of his children, and that's how our fathers on earth can attempt to sacrifice for the good of their children. However, I think there's other natures of Christ and the Father that we as women can try to possess. One virtue that I was able to pick up from Proverbs 31 is a nurturing nature and the nature to love. And I think Christ displays those qualities, and that's how we can learn from him that he, despite all our faults, has continued to love us and nurture us. So I think there are other sides of the nature of Christ and God the Father that we as women can pick up as well. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the beauty of a marriage, is that because men and women have different responsibilities and different sides of characteristics that we pick up from God the Father and Christ, that together, when we're in a marriage, we can best reflect both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's this very funny section in Plato's Republic where they're trying to talk about virtue and define it. And I think it's in the Meno. Sorry. And Meno says, well, Socrates says, well, what is virtue? And he says, well, there's a virtue of a man going off to battle, being an authority. There's a virtue of a woman making pancakes and keeping the home. And in Meno's mind, there's male virtue and there's female virtue. And Socrates very quickly says, no. There has to be one thing that is virtue that encompasses both of those. So we have to work towards the higher idea that would encompass all of the examples. And in your paper, you wanted to get at what female virtue was, mm-hmm. and you chose the traditionally male context to do that, the battlefield. All right? And so my question would be, do you agree with Socrates that virtue really is the same for men and women? Or are there particulars to the nature of virtue that are different in application to men and women?
I would say that virtue is something that the same virtues can be applied to both men and women. Maybe they can be carried out in different ways, but I'd say that they can both attain the same virtues.
All right, thank you very much. Other questions?
Yes. So you have the instance kind of towards the end where Penelope kind of witnesses a bit of Odysseus's unfaithfulness, mm-hmm. And she's hurt by it, but she kind of pushes it aside. Is this supposed to be is this an instance of exemplifying kind of forgiveness and being willing to overlook one another's flaws, or is it more of just kind of trying to deny it or like holding on to it and letting it fester?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. For one, by witnessing, part of it was for the plot, and that by witnessing it, it allowed her to display her vice, which was that she did not share her own experiences with Helen, which could have potentially helped Helen be persuaded faster because they would have been able to relate on a similar level. But it was also a means of forgiveness. However, I guess you could say it was a little easier for Penelope, being that she was from the future, and that this wasn't something that she would have to deal with in the present. But yeah, I think forgiveness is definitely a main theme in that. Yeah. Yes.
Do you think there is a time for women to take out the physical sword? I guess in this case it would be guns these days. Do you think there's a time for them to do that? Or do you think they should always leave it to males? Or is it very?
I don't know. I hadn't done much research into the roles of women in military. It was more a means of imagery for my story. But that's something I'll definitely consider maybe we can talk about later.
Other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Well done. All right, we're going to take a moment break, and then we'll get started with our next presentation.
Appreciate that. You can just, yeah, just put the indexes on the bottom, and then just put the rest back in the box. That'd be great. Thanks. No. Don't need it.
Too much organization. TMO, all right? TMO.